We have about 370,000 faces on this dog, and we can improve VR performance quite a bit in Unreal Engine by bringing down the face count. And one of the easiest ways of doing that in ZBrush is with Decimation Master, which is a plugin that we can access up top in ZBrush by clicking on Z plugin. And we could click on Decimation Master from here and use it, but the problem is that every time we move away from this panel, it disappears. So I prefer to dock the plugin panel by just grabbing on the top left corner and bringing it over above the tool panel. And now there are two steps that we have to go through with decimating something. The first is we have to pre-process our object, and then we have to actually run the decimation command. And let's start out with the brain. We can make the brain the active subtool either by alt-clicking on it or by selecting the brain down here in the subtool panel. I think that alt-clicking is much faster. And oh, by the way, I'm getting around here by just clicking and dragging. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit so we can see what we're doing. And then we'll go to pre-process current. And up top, it says that the operation has completed, so we can go to set this down to 10% and decimate current. And what you'll see if you watch back on the video is that we went from about 45,000 points down to about 4,600, which is a pretty big improvement. And when we actually take this into Unreal Engine, we're going to smooth out the mesh. And in ZBrush, we can preview what that will look like by pushing D on the keyboard. And what you'll see once you push D is it says, currently this mesh has 0 subdivision levels. Would you like to auto-activate dynamic subdivision instead? So take a look up here. We have right now for the brain, we have about 4,600 points. Let's click always yes. And you see that we haven't changed the amount of points, and yet the brain is much smoother now. And that's with the help of that dynamic smoothing. So we can step back down to unsmooth by pressing Shift D, or to get it back, press D. So Shift D to undo, D to smooth. Now let's go ahead and decimate the eyeballs. So I alt-clicked there and we'll pre-process current. And once the operation is complete up there, we can click on decimate current. And we'll push D to smooth those out too. We'll alt-click on the pupils. And then we'll go to pre-process current and decimate current, D to smooth. Okay. Now let's alt-click on the body. And I'm going to press Shift F on the keyboard. And Shift F basically brings up a wireframe view of the model. It also enables us to see the polygroups that we have on the model. And what you'll see if you zoom in and take a look at the dog is that we have different kinds of topologies on some of the features that have been added onto the dog. There are some places where the poly count is really extremely high. Now, if we run Decimation Master, it's going to actually step down the complexity of the geometry relative to the complexity in each area. And I think that we're going to run into some problems in that operation where we're going to have not quite enough faces where we might want them and too many faces where we don't want them. There's another problem with this model, which is if we go down to the polygroup area here and we click on auto groups, what this does is it makes it so that any part of the model that is separate, that is not welded together, it will break that off to be its own different polygroup. Let's go through and actually hide the brain, we'll hide the eyeballs, and we'll hide the pupils. And let's take a look at what's going on here. So if we hold Shift and Control and click on this helmet, that will isolate to just the helmet. If we want to get the body back, we can Shift-click out in this blank area. So let's do that again. Take a look at the inside of the helmet. We've got a bunch of faces here that we don't need. Whoa, that was an accident. I just made it too dark. let's see, let's get this back. There we go. Okay, yeah, we've got a bunch of faces on the inside that we don't need. And if I shift click, let's see if I get this right, shift click on the helmet, that will invert to show us the dog. We've got a bunch of complexity here that we don't need. So we can actually simplify this model quite a bit by just getting rid of these overlapping pieces of geometry. And there's another command that we can use to get this done. So if we go to geometry and Dynamesh, Dynamesh is like Make Solid in Mesh Mixer. And basically what it will do is voxelize the geometry. So Dynamesh is already on. So since it's on, if I hold Control and I drag a box, that will Dynamesh the model. Let me undo. Sometimes you'll find it actually like this, where all you have to do is just click on the button and it will do it. But yeah, there are two ways to skin that cat. Let me undo. And let's turn the resolution up to 100, just so that you can see what it does there. So it gets a bit clearer. Notice how much faster this is than Make Solid 2. It's really very performant. Let's turn this all the way up to 500 and press Dynamesh. And now we have a very clean model. If I press Shift F to turn it back on the polyframe or polygroups visibility, and we shift click on the wings, you can see how we trimmed out that overlapping geometry, which is good. But notice that we went all the way up to 600,000 points. So we went in the wrong direction in terms of reducing complexity. So now what we want to do is move on to Zremesher. And this will help to reduce the poly count, and it will also give us a really nice topology that will flow with the form very efficiently to capture all the detail. So let's turn the target polygons count all the way up to 100, and then click on Zremesher. And this will take a minute to run, so I'll pause the video. We just went from 600,000 faces down to 120,000 faces, which is a pretty good improvement. But we can do even better. We don't need quite so many faces on this part of the model. So let's reduce it further, and we can do that by clicking on half to light that box up. And then if we Zremesh again, it'll do the same operation, just basically kind of taking away some of the complexity from what we just did. I'll pause again. Now we're at about 80,000 faces, but I think we can step it down even further. So let's Zremesh again while half is still active here. So we've reduced the model from about 300,000 faces all the way down to 57,000 faces. So we have about a sixth of the complexity that we have when we started.